Welcome to part 7 of this video series on restoring a Reeves Unicorn horizontal steam engine. In the last video I progressed assembly of the steam engine. This video covers completing assembly. I continued work assembling the engine at the crankshaft end. This video shows me polishing the crankshaft with 800 wet or dry emery paper in the lathe. I used oil to lubricate the emery and tested the eccentric sheaves to make sure they slid onto the crankshaft. I decided to install oilers on the bearing caps. This clip shows me drilling one of the bearing caps with a number 29 drill, which is tapping size for 832 threads per inch. This clip shows me tapping the bearing block with an 832 threads per inch tap. I then cleaned and polished the crank webs. I then machined 2 spacers from brass to go between the crank webs and the bearing blocks to reduce end float on the crankshaft. This photo shows the crankshaft being placed in the bearing blocks. I installed the bearing caps on the bearing blocks, ensuring they were orientated correctly. Next, I installed the big end bearing and connecting rod. This was quite a tricky process, as there's an end plate, 2 bearing blocks and the connecting rod that all have to be bolted together. I created an oil port in the crosshead using a center drill. Using a center drill created a countersink which will make oiling the crosshead and pin easier. Next, I assembled the small end of the connecting rod by connecting it to the crosshead with the crosshead pin and installing the bolts to keep the pin in place. I then inserted the piston into the cylinder and tightened the piston rod into the crosshead using circlip pliers to turn the piston. I manually turned the crankshaft to ensure that everything assembled so far worked smoothly. Next, I used a battery drill on the crankshaft to turn the engine over. At this stage the motion of the engine was quite smooth. The piston was a little tight in the cylinder, however, it will run in when I run the engine on air. I installed the flywheel that I had painted off camera on the crankshaft. This clip shows the cylinder end cover being installed on the cylinder. There were 8 total bolts to tighten in order to install the end cover. I then installed the steam chest on the cylinder. This clip shows tightening 2 nuts to temporarily hold the steam chest in place. This clip shows the eccentric sheave installed on the crankshaft and being secured in place with a grub screw. I installed the eccentric straps and eccentric rod. This clip shows me tightening the bolts that hold the two halves of the eccentric strap onto the eccentric sheave. Next, I installed the pin that holds the eccentric rod to the valve rod. Installing the pin completed assembly of the engine to a point where I can set up the slide valve in the steam chest, complete a rough timing of the engine, complete assembly, and then run the engine on air. This clip shows progress on the engine so far. So, that's assembly of the engine completed. Next, I'll be timing the engine and testing the engine on air. There will be more videos of this project posted soon. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe to support my channel. Thank you.